So, a few Christmases ago, my dad was cooking. Now, my dad, his favorite meal of the year was the Christmas dinner. He didn't really cook other times, but he took a lot of pride in his Christmas dinner. He'd start cooking it days beforehand, preparing everything. And my dad now was a dry alcoholic, right? So he wouldn't partake in Christmas festivities. His thing was just to cook, and then that kept him busy. But this Christmas, he was making a ham and he was boiling it in cider. And for some reason, I don't know how sometimes people damage themselves in these ways, but by opening a can of Bulmers, he cut through his finger and it severed an artery. And we had to drive him to A&E. And all of us spent the whole day in A&E. And we missed Christmas. Christmas was ruined. And my dad, ever the joker, ever the prankster, he loved that through all of January, he could tell people that Christmas is ruined because of alcohol. And everyone thought, oh no, he's back on it again. And that was his joke. He'd say, no, it was drinking. Drinking ruined Christmas. Ladies and gentlemen, dear lovely festive listeners, Colleeny, Bookily, friends from all over the world, welcome to Healing from Irishness. This is the Christmas special. Hello everyone. It's Monday evening. It's getting a little dark. I'm here on the sofa under a blanket with the dog beside me. Best little hot water bottle you could imagine. And I want to talk about Christmas. I want to talk about what it all means to us and how we can maybe do it better. I won't be going home this Christmas. My Christmas this year will be actually on the 24th of December with a bunch of Brazilians who've invited us for dinner, myself and my girlfriend. And there'll be all sorts of things on the menu that are a long, long distance from turkey and spuds and Brussels sprouts. And on the 25th, I don't know, I might go for a swim, might go for a walk, but it won't be like the Christmases that we all know. And I haven't had a Christmas like that in a while, actually. There's something interesting happened. When my dad died, our family kind of got scattered. And we got scattered because my sister lives over in Bermuda and my father died, and then quite soon afterwards my grandmother died. And they were kind of I think every family has people who you do things for. You have members who kind of pull focus, pull attention. They're the ones who care most. You know, my father cared a lot about Christmas. It was very important for him. And my grandmother cared a lot about Christmas. It was very important for her. But when they went, it just didn't seem, the remaining members of the family didn't seem to have enough of an interest to beat that drum, to express the needs. I know that on a few occasions when I thought about not going home, it was often because of my dad that I ended up going home. He would complain, he would moan, he would sort of say, oh, it won't be Christmas. And that would pull at some kind of part of me that just couldn't be sovereign, couldn't be autonomous. I'd hear his sadness and rush to respond like a trained soldier. But not this year and not last year. Our Christmas has kind of fallen apart. So it's from this place of having a kind of a deconstructed Christmas, if you like, that I want to talk about them. And I want to talk about how they are and how they could be and how you can manage this. You see, I have a hunch that if you're listening to this podcast and if you resonate with this podcast, it's almost certainly because you are sensitive. It's almost certainly because you are, and I've said this before in this podcast, but I think those of you who are listening to this podcast have probably been the emotional filter in your family. You were the one who was the most reflective one, the one who processed. And I say these things just because like attracts like. And I know that in the same way that, like, when I do client sessions, that the people who appear on my Zoom screen have almost always had similar experiences to me, have almost always gone through variants of my life with similar emotional responses. So, you, my dear, lovely, sensitive listener, you'll know what this is all about. You'll know how Christmas can be so intense. And I want to talk about that intensity. Why is it so intense? And I think just taking it away from our experience and moving towards the kind of the ephemeral and the esoteric, you got to think like the why would the Catholics who kind of usurped everything, colonized all the old ways of being, why would they have chosen this day if it wasn't perhaps the most powerful day in the calendar, the 25th of December, choosing this day as the birthday and therefore kind of the most important day of of the Catholic year, of kind of like Western society's sort of year. And they chose it because the day had a lot of energy in its own right. Like the period has a lot of energy. It is a time of death. It's in the northern hemisphere at least. It's a period of hibernation. It's a period of low energies. Um, it's a time when our very nature is asking us to connect with emotions. Our very nature is sort of asking us to go inwards. When you think about summer, we're like rabbits, we're out and about. You don't feel anything. We're not going around crying. The emotions don't get to us then. But in winter, at this time, with the shortest days and the long, long nights, we do become more emotional. And this all adds to the intensity. I think the other thing too that adds to the intensity is just that there's such an element of fear around Christmas. And that fear is, what if we don't get it right? It almost feels like the whole year has been a build up to Christmas and getting the Christmas right. And everyone is quite stressed about this. They're stressed about all the kind of the subconscious unmentioned things arising to the surface. And that fear is just connected to the fact that it is very much a judgment on our families. Christmas is a family holiday. It's really a kind of an appraisal of our families. And as mothers and fathers, they often feel that their family, there's this kind of a sense of possession, that mothers and fathers have over their families, that it is my family. Therefore, I am responsible for how the family behaves. I am responsible. If the family are not happy, then it's my fault. If ever there's a time of year for victim consciousness to raise its creepy little head and shit all over the table, it's this. Because people have high expectations. Irish people have phenomenally high expectations. It's interesting, for people with so little entitlement, we slip very easily into this place of having huge expectations. We can go a whole year without loving ourselves. We can go a whole year of being cruel to ourselves with the worst self-talk imaginable. And then at Christmas, expect to receive love. Expect gifts to maybe fill the gap in our empty little hearts. And this is the intensity. It's also the problem is it's a day of just willful forgetting. And I used to do this all the time. I would go home forgetting that my home wasn't a comfortable place. I'd go home like forgetting that I couldn't emotionally connect with my father. I'd go home like just with this expectation, with this dream that I would be loved, that I would open my mouth and my stories would find an audience, that I'd say things, I'd come in, I'd arrive back in the door with my fresh new opinions of the world. And my dream was that my parents would go, wow, Connor. And of course that didn't happen. They had their own opinions. And I, you know, and so this forgetting, we forget that so often our difficulties with our homes, our difficulty with the places that we grew up in, is that we weren't seen and we weren't heard. And we often forget at Christmas. And we go home with the idea, and we jump back into the social scenes with the idea that, this time I'll be heard. This time I'll be seen. So Christmas in many ways for so many of us marks a kind of a reoccurrence of re-traumatization, you know? And so even if you're not home at Christmas, it can be very, very normal to feel the old wounds. It's a little bit like they're more exposed to the cold at this time of year. And so everything hurts more. And for so many people, the expectation is that Christmas will be this soothing balm. It's like so many of us, we work with the dream that retirement will make it all seem worthwhile. And also the idea with Christmas is that so many of us kind of work with the idea that Christmas will make it all worthwhile. That this will be the Christmas where I get praised for all my efforts. This will be the Christmas where I get seen and heard. And of course, this doesn't happen because ultimately, for so many of us, the things that aren't said, the subconscious kind of currents that hang out around the table, the papering over all the cracks, it just means that no healing can really take place because nothing changes, nothing moves on. Nobody wakes up, and you're not moving on. You're not waking up. You're still in that place of going home with expectation, of going home and immediately jumping into the role of the child again. And this is the thing too, we're often the problem with going home at Christmas is that we're often forced to play outdated roles. I remember my Christmases in the past were always this sort of thing where I would kind of go home reluctantly. Or I would go home because I was excited by other people talking about Christmas. I'd be in a relationship with someone and they would say, oh, I'm going home. I can't wait for Christmas. And I think because I wanted so much for my family to be a place of love, that I would glorify our Christmases. And it's true that when I was a kid, when I was a very young kid, and my grandparents were alive, my great grandparents were alive, Christmas was marvelous. We had music. There was so many people. There was all these grandchildren, tons of us. And we would all be in a big house and, all the uncles were there, like drunk driving from all the way across the island. And my granddad had the keyboard out and people were playing songs and there was dogs and there was turkeys or chickens and whatnot and puddings and everything. And it went on and it went on. You went from mass to the house and you didn't leave the house until maybe 1 a.m. It was the night of the year when you could stay up latest. And I'd remember that walking home again and seeing stars and frosty night and the excitement of being out that late with my mother. And that was the Christmas of the past. And then that Christmas, I think for me, was the thing that always brought me home. But as soon as I hit like my teenage years, like Christmas was never like that again. Christmas was always a more difficult time, a stressful time. a time when I always felt like I had too much exposure to my family. And so getting older then, I think for me, what happened is I would start to try and set up situations where I would find myself in different parts of the world. I would run away. And I can remember 3, 4 phone calls, messages around November from different places, and me saying, I'm probably not going to make it home. And then hearing a kind of a sad voice on the other end of the line, or maybe it'd be my mother or my grandmother or my father, and then suddenly feeling like I was powerless to not go home. And then I'd go back. And my Christmases were often just me arriving in a couple of days before, having one night on the lock in Dublin, and then another night on the lockdown in Clane, and then waking up Christmas morning in some friend's house, and having breakfast with him and his family, and then waiting for my mum and my dad to come and collect me, and then spending Christmas Day so hungover that I couldn't really even talk to people. And then the day after Christmas, I'd clear off and do a Vipassana meditation retreat. So really trying to like limit my exposure to Christmas. And I feel this is the part of Christmas where we get some things wrong, where we're not really living in our authenticity. We're doing something reluctantly, and you have to be so careful of the energetic effects of not being authentic. You got to understand that everything you do, everything you say, speak, think, and feel is reflected back to you. And when you act out of alignment, now when I say act out of alignment, what I mean is that you have been designed with a purpose. There are things that you are meant to do. You know you're meant to do them because it feels good inside your body. Your body will send you yeses. You'll feel it in your solar plexus. You'll feel it in an emotional wave. You'll feel it in your belly. And we're designed to do these things that light us up. And when we do these things that light us up, the universe reflects glory to us. It reflects joy. It reflects beauty. When we do things against our wanting, when we do things against our will, things that are out of alignment, we kind of put ourselves on a rocky road to trouble, because that's not what we're supposed to do. So the problem with going home for so many of us, especially at Christmas, is that we're forced to step into this energetic place of inauthenticity. And that has a tremendous effect on our soul. I remember when I lived in Berlin, and I remember the days after Christmas in Dublin Airport, Terminal 2, and flying out, and seeing people, and it looked like a triage unit. You know what I mean? You just see these people, old friends of mine who moved to Berlin. And I speak about Berlin specifically because I think the type of Irish person who moves to Berlin really has had a hard time fitting in Ireland. And you're moving to Berlin because Berlin is the sort of place where you can go mad in a way that you can't really go mad in Ireland. Or you could go mad in Ireland, but you would be so under the spotlight. The thing about Berlin, the beauty of Berlin, is it just gave people a lot of freedom. Now, there's other places in the world that give you that amount of freedom, but Berlin at a time and a place was really a spot where you could just go and live a very expressive life. And I remember being at the airport surrounded by these people who looked so shell-shocked from returning to Ireland, fitting into outdated roles, dropping back into their bedrooms, running into their old friends, having the same kind of frustrated glances from their parents and so on and so forth, and then escaping back to Berlin with their tails tucked between their legs to just shiver away in bed for a few days until they could restore their strength. So what I want to talk about mostly in this podcast, that was a long preamble, is how to manage yourself at Christmas. What to do if you're going home, even if you live in Ireland and you're going home for Christmas, or even just your time in Christmas in general. This is kind of like how I think you can manage it. And I think the first thing to do is to make sure that you don't overstay your welcome. So the shorter time you can spend, I think the better. You got to understand that your family will not have changed. And the more you go back with this idea that I can handle this, I can manage this, the more you kind of like eh, drop yourself into that place of incoherence, the more damage you can do to your energetic field, right? I think it's so important that you can go on a high and leave on a high. And the way to ensure that is often just keeping it as short as possible. Now, by doing this, immediately you're going to trigger all the feelings of guilt inside of you. I made a podcast on guilt before. The number one thing for all Irish people to do is not to not feel guilt, but to recognize that you can feel guilt and it's not such a big deal. You chose to be Irish. You chose to come into this lifetime and be Irish to work with guilt. Other countries, other cultures don't feel this. Other cultures have no problem saying, no, I'm not in the mood for this. Look at the Germans, Jesus Christ, they don't feel guilt. Of course, how would they feel guilt? They're arming Israel again. You know what I mean? There's no way they feel guilt. Um, but we do. It's kind of, you could say it's our karmic purpose. Our karmic purpose is to explore guilt. Our karmic purpose is not to just be crippled by guilt, but to transmute it, to transform the guilt. The way you transform the guilt is you feel it and you go, that's all right. How do you transform cold water in the sea? How do you transform that? You go into the water, you feel it, you endure it, and you go, that's kind of fine. I can stay in this for a couple of minutes. That's what we do with guilt. Number two, if you're going home and you want to preserve your sanity, just don't try and convince people of your way of life. In a way, it's kind of childish. You know, like if your family don't share your beliefs, then don't share your beliefs with them. I know there's this desire and you're like, I want to educate them. But God, there's nothing more Catholic than arriving home with a missionary zeal. I'm going to teach my parents how wrong homophobia is. I'm going to teach them how wrong xenophobia is. What happens in these scenarios 99% of the time is you'll just end up making them feel ashamed of themselves. And if someone feels shame, they will not change. If someone feels shame, they're just going to avoid contact with the person who makes them feel shame. They'll become more entrenched. The way to change your family is to just not focus on the things that hurt you or the things that annoy you. You can change your family. You change your family by expecting the best. When they act a certain way, when they speak a certain way, you go, you don't become enraged by it, you don't become triggered by it. You just expect the best. And you remain coherent. That's their psychodrama. If they're scared of changes, if they're scared of wars and so on and so forth, that's theirs. That's their form of entertainment, as grim as it might be. And it's not your responsibility to change them. Your responsibility is to remain grounded, unflappable. I used to love this. My dad loved to like get into arguments with me. It was his way of like communicating with and bonding was just having intellectual debate. And he'd love it when I came home and the first thing he'd do is he'd approach me with a thesis, with an argument. And quite often I'd pick up because I have a fairly big ego on me too. I'd pick up the bait and I'd go for it and I'd get into the argument. And then minutes later I'd realize I'm drained. I don't want to be in the same room with him. Like, what am I doing? So my new protocol was just to go, oh, you're probably right. He'd come at me with some sort of thing and I'd say, you're probably right. Or instead, he'd come at me with this, oh, you see these like Nigerians, they get a phone when they come to the country, they get a car and this. And I just kind of look at him and go, ah, do they? I had no idea. I just wouldn't pick it up. And then he would kind of he would do this funny thing. It looked like he would glitch in front of me. Make your family glitch. That's what you do. Just stay coherent. Don't get involved. And then my dad would calm down and we could talk about normal things that weren't polarizing. Number three is I think it's really important that at this time, when you go into the unfamiliar territory that is your family, and you're exposing yourself to what is basically old software. You're advancing, you're new. They're old. They're in their ways. They have different categories of reason than you have. They might not believe that gays should get married. They might not believe that, that their greatest concern in the world might be mortgages. All they want to talk about is money and security and the future and things like this. And these might just not be your concerns. And it's important that you keep lifelines open. Like I remember when I would go home, I, I, I'd have like flowing text message conversations with friends who were back and who were also home, and we kind of support each other. Now, an interesting thing as I get older, um, it's kind of like I noticed like in the last couple of years, there's been a kind of a falling off of friends, but I always have, and this falling off of friends that I know for me is just it's a natural process. It's a kind of I am in a period of just death and rebirth. I know that, and so a lot of things are just dying, and uh, it's kind of I'm in a sort of a slightly void phase, which will then give rise to like you could call it a fallow phase. So there's not what would have been. I would have had a very bubbly social life before, and that's kind of tapered off in the last couple of years. And I needed a rest. I needed to just shut up for a while. I was talking too much, and maybe shut up from socializing so I can just talk into microphones. But anyway, it's so important that you have people who share the same categories of reason that you have. That's an expression that Jessa Reed uses. I'm borrowing it. And what it means is just people who, when you say, hey, I kind of, I don't want, I think I'm going to take the year off work and just explore art. People who respond with, wow, that's a great idea. You should do that. Rather than, oh my God, how are you going to you're going to be destitute. You're going to be out on the street. You need to have people who echo your beliefs, who can be your support. When we go home to our family, we often don't have this. So it's really important to stay connected to those people. Number 4, don't have any expectations. Your expectations just set you up for so much trouble. They really do. They just set you up for disappointment. When you can go home with this idea that my cup is so full. Now, what I mean by that is I mean like just love yourself. Don't go back with this idea that I'm exhausted, I'm knackered, and I want to be taken care of. I want to be treated. I remember I'd often see my sister. My sister would do this thing whenever she would come home. She'd be in the door half an hour and she'd be sick. Just she'd already be, oh, I have a headache. And my mom running around to get the Solpadeine. And I kind of look and I go, oh my God, this is it. Like she's coming back for this experience to be the sick child who gets cared for again. And I think like you got to be so careful that you don't go into these disempowering strategies. Like you can't go home like a wounded animal. Love yourself. Fix your own wounds. It's beautiful to be cared for. It's beautiful to be loved. But if you go home with that expectation, especially from family who maybe haven't always been emotionally fluent or who haven't been available, you could set yourself up for just disaster. Fill your own cup. Make sure you are so full of love. We often go home with a neediness, with a hunger, with a desperation. I'd go home with this idea that this time everything will be made right. It never was made right. It was the level of my expectation was commensurate to the level of my disappointment. When I went home with the idea that I'm not expecting anything of the food, I'm not expecting anything of the conversation, I'm just going back here to just sit on a sofa and have a few chats and eat way too many biscuits. My expectations were that low, and those were the best Christmases. Number 5, and this is tricky, forgive people. It just helps. Like the way that we're moving right at the moment, the way that you can operate best in this world is by simply having light energy. The denser your energy is, the more prone you are to sickness, the more prone you are to like overwhelm, exhaustion, emotional outbursts. Keep your energy light. The way you keep your energy light is you don't carry resentment, you don't carry hatred, you don't carry anger. Light energy, you know it. I'm not talking about just being breezy, but just being in this place of forgiveness and understanding. Doesn't mean you have to like people. It doesn't mean you have to like spend more time with people. But you got to be so careful about carrying anger and resentment. Because to carry anger and resentment means you have to generate anger and resentment. Those things are poisons inside the body. The way we forgive people is by simply letting go of the victim script. So, for example, for so many years, I hated my dad, and I hated my dad because there was just things I couldn't do in this life. I hated him for being like, oh, like from my scarcity mentality. I hated him from like my low confidence. I hated him for like my inability to like find success in life. And then by working on my scarcity, by working on my confidence, by working on my relationship with my own success, by doing the things I was scared of doing, I slowly just dropped that resentment from my father. The greatest revenge is a life well lived. If you want to forgive your parents, just build a beautiful life for yourself. It's very, very hard to hold on to resentment when you've got everything you ever wanted. And the last piece of advice, and I think this is the best, not just because I'm a writer and a reader, but bring a book. You're going to find yourself so often at Christmas trapped in conversations, trapped in rooms where someone will say, let's turn off the TV and we'll all have a chat, or something like that. Or you'll find yourself just stuck in situations and you'll feel your precious energy, the precious elixir of life that flows through you, you'll feel it depleting. And in moments like this, you'll want to go onto your phone, but everyone looks kind of harshly at people when they're on their phone. Especially when you're back at Christmas, there's that chance that someone will say, it's Christmas, don't be on your phone. Or it's family time, don't be on your phone. But if you have a book, a good old page turner, you can just disappear into it. Nobody ever says, oh, would you put down that book? Or at least I haven't come across them. People understand that if you're reading a book, that you're doing something worthwhile, that it's enjoyable. Maybe they'll still talk at you while you're doing it, but you can just get lost in the pages. And while I'm mentioning books, maybe I should just say that if you haven't heard of this, I have 2 books. It's Truth About Love, and this is it. They're both very adequate books for escaping families at Christmas. And that's all I wanted to say. It's a very intense time of year. Intense because it's connected with memory. Intense because at an astrological, at a seasonal level, this time is potent. It's death time. We go into the blackness. We're going to emerge in February back into the light. But right now we're in the hungry gap. It's the time of year when nothing's growing. When emotionally we are being compelled to look inside ourselves, to be a bit raw. And that's scary. So be extra kind to yourself. Be extra loving with yourself. I'll be doing some sessions in the new year if you want to reach out. Um, I've also, we're doing on the 26th in my community, we're going to do a post-Christmas check-in. If you want to join that on my Patreon. I have courses if you're looking for a Christmas present for someone who wants love or wants to heal from their Irishness. And that's it. I'll see you all soon. Have a great time. We're moving into an incredibly powerful year next year. Energetically, there's a lot of things that are going to start next year in your lives, in all our lives. Just a lot of things are about to happen. So try and stay grounded if you can. I mean, by grounded, I just mean journal, read books, walk in nature, relax. Really relax. Take time off. Okay. Love yous. Slán. Happy Christmas. Bye bye.